Welcome to the Lost Tracks podcast. I'm Jesse Bass, your host. Today, we sit down with Terry Telson, a long-haired hippie songwriter from the Chicago folk circuit of the 60s. Terry's album, While in Exile, is a soft, dreamy, and melancholic look into his time spent in the high mountains of northern Arizona. It also happens to be the first released under my label, Skull Valley Records. When I think of home, I think of the Sonoran desert landscape, two-lane highways that stretch beyond imagination, and the community of artists, friends, and family I hold close across the state of Arizona. Skull Valley Records was created in an effort to preserve the rich musical history of my home, the Grand Canyon State. Giving back in this way has been the most challenging and fulfilling experience of my life so far. Going in, I knew this would be a labor of love, but what I didn't expect was all the support I would receive along the way. To everyone that's tuning in for the first time, or has been following my work since that first YouTube post, thank you. You've made it all possible. In fact, Terry Telson was first put on my radar by the community we fostered. As some of you may know, I've created and continued to moderate a public archive of Arizona's private press releases. Everyone with information on the local music scene is invited to submit artists and albums that fit the criteria. Thanks to one of y'all, this is how I was first introduced to Terry's music. I think at the time, there were only 2 of Terry's songs that you could listen to online. Someone who had the album recorded them straight off the vinyl and uploaded them to YouTube. Here's the first one I listened to, a sublime and whimsical guitar-driven folk song titled Mermaid.
Sailor's dream to make love to the fable from the sea, and you can hear a voice calling softly in the breeze. Well, many have met the doom, and their ships have fallen silent in the gloom. Oh, they could not resist the warm voice in the breeze. But this is one sailor shall not see on the reefs. Yes, this is one sailor shall not tempt to the reefs. With my mainsail set, her voice like an echo was chasing after me.
I didn't even wait to hear the complete song before I found a copy of Terry's album for sale and had it shipped to my place. When it arrived some days later, I wasted no time in listening to the entire work, a poignant slice of Southwestern folk. With each song, I drifted deeper into the guitar, harmonica, and keyboard arrangements. Every song felt like a live recording, like Terry was right there in the room with you. Eventually, the needle made its last revolution around the turntable and the room fell silent. I slipped the record back in its sleeve and admired the artist on the front. A young hippie with hair down to his shoulders and prescription aviators. Dressed in a turtleneck sweater, dark denim jeans, and a beat-up pair of Vans. Sat in his studio, he's surrounded by instruments. 2 guitars, a Fender Rhodes electric piano, and most notably, a banjo, displayed up front and center. The sleeve had grown weathered, and I began to imagine how Terry had aged as well. After all, this album was pressed nearly 50 years ago in 1975. For its age, the album was in wonderful condition, and I'm never one to complain about a bit of wear and tear. In fact, it's a quality I admire about records. Before you even hear a single note of music, you're given this window into the album's history. How was it stored? How often was it played? Was it cared for? This album was obviously cherished and would continue to be. With the help of my label partners, Sam Holborn and Stephen Chen, together we scoured public archives in search of Terry. Looking for any scrap of information we could find, we compiled the list of contacts that might lead us to the man we were looking for. One by one, we dialed the numbers on our list until we eventually found him. At first, Terry was hesitant, even dismissive of the idea of a reissue. I could understand why. I had no visible track record of this kind of work, and his album had already fallen prey to bootleggers a few years back. But I persisted and eventually broke through to him. At the end of the day, all it took was the magic word: vinyl. There are a lot of considerations that go into a reissue. But before we start on that, I think it's time we hear from the man himself.
We were always playing to survive, scratching our knees from club to club and also college to college, basically begging to survive. We'd hop from one circuit to the other and try to get enough in to make some sort of living. And it's always been, well, okay, we've worn out our welcome here, so let me see, we'll go back to shoveling whatever dookie to make a living, and then go back again and try to make it. So, which is always the case with any sort of art. Now, in the 60s, what changed my life a lot was the long hair and the folk singers. I originally started out in life as a drummer, and what started me then was the Ventures and Wipeout and things like that. And then I found out, let me see, there were more girls attracted to the guitar players. So I thought, okay, let me start that. And really is that I found my skills were more so the rhythms and the lyrics.
Terry was an artist first and foremost. His biggest influences were Paul Simon and Bob Dylan during the Greenwich Village days. Lyricism was his biggest focus, but he never let himself overthink the process.
Lyrics were either there to me or they weren't. I started writing a song and it was either there or it wasn't. If I started writing a song, if I wasn't done with it within an hour, hour and a half, the song wasn't there. It either started with an idea with me and the lyrics just flowed. They were done. If I had to think for a day or two about the lyrics, there wasn't a song.
When the 60s came to an end, Terry packed up his life and traveled cross-country in search of silence and serenity. When the opportunity to live in the high mountains of Prescott, Arizona was presented to him, he took it and began to work on his album, while in exile. In true wanderer spirit, Terry let his instincts lead the way. No song of Terry's encapsulates this quality of his quite like this next one, Where the Wind Blows Me.
Where the wind blows me, I will go. And when I'll be back, I don't know. Like the wagon wheel, I just roll. 'Cause where the wind blows me, I will go. Where you going, my son? Can you tell anyone why you hitting the road? And where'd we go wrong? 'Cause where the wind blows me, I will go. And when I'll be back, I don't know. Like the wagon wheel, I just roll. 'Cause where the wind blows me, I will go. I'm chasing after a dream. It seems real to me. Things I want to do. Things I want to be.
We were going in the scene in Chicago, and I felt I never had enough time to really work on the music there. It was just putting things together that I thought would sell, that I thought would please crowds there. And so I never had the time to really work on the music. So I thought, okay, let me unplug from that and go someplace and just work on what I thought was musically in me. So I got the opportunity to go to Arizona in the mountains and just work on what I had to do musically. While in exile is what came out of it. So there I am in Prescott. It was cowboys, retired, and hippies, and none of them mixed all together. So you can tell which group I was in. I didn't wear a cowboy hat. I wasn't retired yet. And I had nice long hair. The cowboys wanted to kick my ass. And the retired people were saying, "Get your hair cut, dude." So that was pretty much it. But back then it was a nice place to be because there was not much going on there. And that was really the whole point of being there. There was nothing. And we lived out in the woods down one of the dirt roads. That's where we did record. I did record while in exile, though. I work better alone when I lock myself in this studio and just go at it.
The origins of this album were just as I had imagined. Terry locked away in a cabin and quite literally in exile. The album was completed after 3 years of living in Prescott. Terry took his masters to Phoenix and had 200 copies pressed. He distributed them himself and even had a mailing list of supporters who were the first in line to purchase his music. I often wonder how many of the original copies survived, and I feel so blessed to have one for myself. More importantly, I was curious to hear if the masters still existed. For anyone who might not be familiar with this vocabulary, the masters are the original recordings of the music. They contain the most information and are the most precise tool to use when creating new copies of a record or tape. When reissuing an album, one of the first questions I like to ask is if the artist still owns and has copies of the masters. In Terry's case, he had lost track of them. Not the answer I wanted to hear, but by no means was that a nail in the coffin for this project. If we didn't have a master, our next best option was to use a copy of the record on hand. When recording off a record or tape, you will always record the unique pops, hiss, and natural wear of the record itself. To correct these issues, we can have an album mixed and mastered again. It's not a perfect process, but the result is a clean-sounding record with a lot of heart. At the end of the day, I'm very happy with how the reissue sounds. It radiates character and perfectly encapsulates Terry's Southwestern outlaw spirit, which, by the way, was a theme in his music even when he was living and performing in Chicago.
Bounty Man was really because of Clint Eastwood at the time.
You bounty hunter.
That whole sort of thing. That's where the whole Bounty Man thing came from, the whole concept of it. I think that early EP shows my abilities at that time. I think While in Exile shows that my abilities and thought process got better as I went to Arizona. And as I remember, except for Bounty Man, the other 3 cuts sucked, but it was good for its time. And we used to do those to sell at venues that I mentioned. And so there must be some of those out there before While in Exile, which was done in Arizona, of course. And we needed something to do or something to put out there. And it's interesting that I've not seen those show up.
To this day, Bounty Man hasn't surfaced in any record collections. The only known copy is with Terry, framed and mounted on his wall. The EP was recorded after he returned home from the Vietnam War. He was called to serve in his late teens and was actually the first pick of the draft lottery in 1969.
Well, here was the thing. At that time, there was a lottery for the draft. And so I thought, I'm going to be picked out, 200 and something or whatever. And when the guy dug out for the lottery, I was number 1. So out of 300, and all that time, I'm going to be picked out way down the line. and he dug in the bowl, and September 14th was the first date they picked out. So it's like I was freaked. I started out what was supposed to be into the cannons, and when I got to Vietnam, I wound up being an infantry anyway, as to what they call a forward observer. So when we go into a firefight, they'd send me with a radio to the front of the firefight to direct the artillery. I'll tell you, I didn't mind getting out of the service. I didn't need to be told twice. The Army wasn't for me. I got shot, got out of the Army. So I was not at all sorry to get out of the military and get back to Chicago.
Not long after that, he began to work on his first EP. He was in his early 20s. His music blends themes from both sides of the emotional spectrum. It wasn't hard for him to find the light in the dark or vice versa. As rough as life had been, it was just as beautiful. After all, he had an amazing partner by his side. Let's take a moment to listen to a song off of Bounty Man. Inspired by his wonderful partner Barbara, this one's called I Love You.
It's not fancy, but it's clean as hell. There was times when I was lonesome. I roamed from shore to shore, but all my roaming has led me back to your door. Took a ride on a ship or two. I took a train ride too. Now I'm asking you, what will you do? I wanna be yours forevermore.
Next year is our 50th anniversary. And then, believe it or not, the first date we had, I saved Barb from drowning when we went swimming, her and I and a couple other couples. And she tried to swim, and I didn't know she couldn't swim. And so she was drowning, and I jumped in the water and saved her. And after that, we kind of started doing our thing and got married in 74. We got married in Prescott, Arizona, as a matter of fact, in their little courthouse there. And it was the judge of the town and two office ladies. And they were just so tickled to be the witnesses.
Terry's love story spans continents and decades. We asked Terry if Barbara's parents found their love story as beautiful as we did, and as it turns out, they weren't exactly thrilled about their daughter traveling across the country with a vagabond folk singer. Shocker.
Her mother hated me. Her father was okay, but her mother hated me till the day she died. Her mother kept telling her, it isn't gonna work, it ain't gonna work. She offered Barb a car to come back home. It was a piece of shit. And I told her one time, I said, hey, you offered the car to the wrong person. You offered it to me. I'd have sent her back home.
Pretty sure that's just a joke. We hope. Hearing Terry's lifelong love story was heartwarming. It also changed the way I look at this young man on the cover of While in Exile. I don't see a loner folk musician anymore, because I know that Barbara was right there in front of him, taking the photo of the man she loved.
Thank you.
After Terry's time in Arizona came to an end, he and Barbara packed up their lives and continued their journey west, this time landing in San Francisco. By the time they arrived in the Bay Area, the summer of love had long faded, and the hippie folk music had faded too. At this time in his life, Terry stepped away from the studio. For 10 years, he paused on making any new recordings. This was in part due to the culture shift away from folk music, but other factors in Terry's life started to have their own impact as well. Shortly after settling on the West Coast, Terry was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis, a disease of the central nervous system in which the body attacks itself by mistake.
I finally wound up going to Sacramento, where there were neurologists who could follow me more closely and had neurologists who knew more about it than some of the Bay Area neurologists, at least multiple sclerosis. So, and that's where it finally came from. And it sucks that it starts eating away at the skills as the years go on. And that's why so many CDs where I locked myself in the studio and started producing music and then followed the music and different courses of music to try to get it out in me until I lost all those skills, where I am today. So that was part of the whole thing, is to try to get it out there before I couldn't anymore.
When Terry returned to making music, he went full force. Today, Terry has recorded a whopping 109 full-length albums. Terry is a force of nature, a true artist, and one hell of a human being. His perseverance and unique style in everything he does is inspirational. That's why when it came to my reissue of the album, I wanted to capture the same spirit of the original. So naturally, I decided to save all the details from my copy and keep them the same on the reissue. Like exactly the same. There's no text on the spine. The record inserts and details are printed on a piece of 8x11 printer paper. And we even kept the previous record manufacturer's logo, Wakefield Pressing, a legendary and important piece of Arizona's music history that shut its doors in 1989. This was how Terry released the record in 1975, and this is how I wanted to release it in present day. All of these details were incredibly important to me. These are the specifics of a private press record that separates them from a large studio release. No design or marketing team, just real people working with what they have access to. Everyone thought we were crazy for this. Our manufacturer actually had to double check with us and make sure we knew what we were asking for. But I was confident. In 50 years, I really wanted these reissues to look and feel just like my original copy. When this record hit the shelves last year, some collectors thought they dug up the real thing. A local shop actually told me that someone nearly fainted when they pulled our record. He thought it was the original. When the owner cleared up the confusion, he put the record back. Sorry, bud. But overall, I think the community appreciated it, because all 300 copies found a home. Yep, we sold out. It feels just as good saying those words as it did hearing them. Beyond any monetary gain, my mission of preserving Terry's music was a success. As of the release of the record, Terry's music is also available on all streaming platforms, Spotify, Apple Music, wherever you listen. Hopefully this is the first of many vinyl reissues from Skull Valley. Besides my two beautiful children, this work is the most important thing I've ever done. And hitting this milestone reinforces everything I've worked for. And it seemed like Terry was happy with my work as well. And that was the most gratifying part of all.
When I know you found interest in it, I thought, well, you must be on drugs, so I'll talk to you. Anyway, no, it was nice to know you wanted to put it out on vinyl. I thought that was interesting. That was good. Then I was more on board for it. I thought, well, that'd be nice to put it out on vinyl and see if there's any interest in it. Because really, over all the years, over all the CDs, it's always been about the music. It's never really been about me, about the CDs, about the album, about that. It's really about the bigger picture. It's about the music. And if that's this album or the album you've produced, if that brings the album out there, the music on it, and it stays forever. I'm Jack.
After this release, I was no longer just a record label on paper, but in practice as well. For anyone with a dream or a vision, please pursue it. You might find you're not the only one who will benefit from it. As of this podcast recording, Skull Valley has 3 releases under its banner. Terry Telson, Lloyd Rowland, of course, and Morris Belknap, whose story you'll hear in an upcoming episode. I'm so excited to have been given the opportunity to carry on these artists' songs and stories. We're going to end today's show with the 9th track from While in Exile, a solemn and dreary song about a criminal on the run, and a clear crowd favorite from all the songs off the album. Accompanied by a haunting harmonica and a Fender Rhodes, Terry's lyricism puts itself on full display. This one's called When Evening Comes.
Crystal chandeliers in the morning sun, spreading colors on everyone. Old lace curtains through a looking glass. The colored lights, they are fading fast. When evening comes, I'll be on the run. Yeah, when evening comes, I'll be on the run. Lost my job in a factory. Can't make the rent, can't buy groceries. No food stamps and no welfare. Seems as though no one really cares. When the evening comes, I'll be on the run. When the evening comes, I'll be on the run. Hop a freight down to Mexico, and from there don't know where I'll go. Shot a man back in Iowa. The jury said
I think every one of us has light and dark in us. It's just whether you show it or not. And I've always been someone who's straight up front. Show you the light, show you the dark. Here's who I am, like it or don't like it. So I'll show you both sides. Take it for what it is. And that's where this album goes. It goes totally light, totally dark. See both sides, see what you like, see what you don't like. And the whole album, While in Exile, lays open my soul, light and dark. So you see all of me on the album, really. What we just talked about, Mermaid, is a real fantasy sort of song, a light. And then When the Evening Comes, that's the real dark side. I've always considered musicians as storytellers. That's what we do. We tell stories, especially folk people. We tell stories about what it was that has gone on in our lives and other people's lives. And I think, like in the times of castles and stuff, they used to have people that would go around and pass information from one village to another, so that was the only way. They didn't have newspapers then, and they would go around passing information from one village to the next. And that's what folk singers were doing, basically, is passing information on and telling stories. I think that one of the interesting things is music. I think an album like While in Exile or the EP before that is what people get out of it. It's not so much what I meant, it's what you or the listener takes out of it. It's not what I meant by any of those songs, Mermaid or When the Evening Comes. It's like a painting. You walk up to it, and it's not so much what the artist meant by, it's not so much what I meant by what those songs mean. It's what you, as a listener, take away from it. When you listen to Mermaid or you listen to When the Evening Comes, it's what you, the listener, take away from that. So if it means something in your life and apply that to it, then I've done my job.
So that darkness is more of a figurative part. It wasn't an actual part of you. You didn't actually, like murder somebody and have to get out of Chicago and go to Prescott. That's not the true story, right?
No, I don't think so. Are they still looking for me?
No, I'm just messing around. As always, thank you for tuning in. And if you enjoy what you've heard, don't forget to like and subscribe and share with your friends. This podcast was co-created and produced by myself and Ryan Farrell. Better preserved than forgotten.